God's anger burned as the cries of his people, the Israelites, reached heaven. His eyes were like flames, filled with the sorrow of his children's pain. So God spoke to Moses, who had once lived as a prince in Pharaoh's court and now lived far away.
Go back.
God commanded.
Tell Pharaoh to let my people go.
Moses, with his brother Aaron, returned to the land of Egypt. He stood before Pharaoh, tall and firm.
The Lord, the God of Israel, says, "Let my people go, that they may worship me."
Pharaoh's eyes narrowed, and his heart hardened. Who is this God, that I should listen to him? The Israelites will stay as my slaves. Hearing this, God's anger grew. He sent his first sign of power. The waters of the Nile, so fresh and clear, turned to blood at Moses' command. Moses struck the river with his staff, and the water became dark and red, killing the fish. The whole river bled, filling the air with a foul smell, and it smelled so bad. The Egyptians dug wells along the riverbank, searching for fresh water. But the water was bitter, red as wine, and Pharaoh's heart stayed as hard as stone, ignoring what God had said. God watched as Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go, so he sent another plague. Suddenly, frogs came leaping from the river, filling the houses, the streets, and even Pharaoh's palace. They covered every bed, hopped into the bread, and leaped wherever people tread, croaking through the night. Frightened by the frogs, Pharaoh called Moses. "Pray to your God to take them away, and I will let your people go," he swore. But when the frogs were gone, Pharaoh turned in glee, and his promise disappeared. He would not free the Israelites. Seeing this, God was displeased. He told Moses to strike the dust off the ground. When Moses obeyed, the dust turned into gnats, tiny insects that filled the air, biting and swarming over everyone and everything. The magicians of Egypt tried to copy this sign but failed. "This is the finger of God," they warned Pharaoh, but still, Pharaoh would not listen. Next, God sent swarms of flies to fill the land. They buzzed and bit the Egyptians, filling every home and covering every inch of ground. The flies hovered in the sky, landing in every eye, buzzing and biting. But in Goshen, where the Israelites lived, not a single fly was seen. God protected his people, keeping them safe and sound. Pharaoh called for Moses again. "Take the flies away, and I will let your people go," he cried. But when the flies left, Pharaoh's word was a lie. God's patience was running thin. He sent a terrible disease upon the animals of Egypt. The horses, donkeys, camels, cows, and sheep all grew sick and died in the fields. But not a single animal of the Israelites fell ill. Yet, even as the livestock perished, Pharaoh's heart did not change. Then God sent painful boils that broke out on the skin of the Egyptians and their animals. The magicians, covered in boils themselves, could not stand before Moses. But even in the midst of such pain, Pharaoh's stubbornness remained. He would not let them win. Though God's warning was clear and true, Pharaoh ignored what he must do. Once more, God sent Moses to warn Pharaoh of what was to come. Pharaoh ignored the warning, and a mighty hailstorm fell upon Egypt. Hail like fire and ice came crashing down, shattering crops and trees, and killing anyone left outside. But in the land of Goshen, where God's people lived, no harm befell them, no hail fell. God was with his people, and all was well. Pharaoh, trembling, begged Moses to stop the storm. But when the hail ceased, his heart grew hard again. After the hail, God sent locusts, swarming in from every direction. They covered the land, devouring every plant and tree that had survived the hail. The land of Egypt was left bare, with nothing green in sight. Pharaoh's advisors pleaded with him, "Let the Israelites go." But Pharaoh refused. Then, darkness fell over Egypt like a heavy shroud, covering the land in a thick black cloud, so dense that no one could see or move for 3 whole days. But in the homes of the Israelites, there was light, shining bright. God's power was clear and divine. Pharaoh again called Moses and said, "Go, but leave your flocks and herds behind." Moses refused. Furious, Pharaoh sent him away, threatening his life. Finally, God prepared to send his last and most terrible plague. He told Moses, "At midnight, I will pass through Egypt, and every firstborn son will die, from Pharaoh's own son to the son of the lowest servant. But tell the Israelites to mark their doorposts with the blood of a lamb. When I see the blood, I will pass over their homes." That night, a great cry arose from Egypt as the firstborn sons died. Pharaoh's own son lay lifeless, and his heart broke. Grief-stricken, Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron. "Go," he said, "take your people and leave Egypt. Worship your God as you have asked. Take your flocks and herds, and be gone." At last, the Israelites were free. They left Egypt quickly, carrying all their belongings and the treasures the Egyptians gave them. They sang songs of joy, knowing God had delivered them. But Pharaoh, full of regret and anger, changed his mind. He gathered his army and pursued them. When the Israelites reached the Red Sea, the sea stood tall like a mighty wall. The people of Israel were trapped. The sea stretched out before them, and Pharaoh's army closed in behind. But Moses raised his staff, and God parted the waters of the sea. A path of dry land appeared, and the Israelites crossed safely to the other side. When Pharaoh's army followed, the waters crashed down, and they sank like stones, drowning them all. And so, God's people were free, saved by his mighty hand. They journeyed toward the promised land, their hearts filled with hope, for God was with them. Moral lesson: this story teaches us that obedience to God brings protection and blessings, while pride and stubbornness lead to downfall. Trusting in God's plan, even in difficult times, results in justice and freedom for those who persevere. Dear viewers, thank you so much for watching this wonderful story about the 10 plagues of God. Remember, no mountain that stands before you can bring you down, because God is always there to protect you and shield you with his glory. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family.